Hello everyone. Good evening. Welcome to today's session. Okay, I hope I am audible. All right. So today we are going to start with a new series of portions. We have already covered modern India, medieval India, and we are also looking into the current affairs monthly MCQ series and all. So to cover the entire history, the major chunk that is remaining is ancient India. Okay, we are going in the reverse order. We started from modern India and we already dealt with medieval and we are now taking on ancient India. So from today, there will be, on alternate days, there will be sessions on ancient India. And by after this, we will also look into some portions of art and culture, and the entire history package, at least the basic history package should be completed. All right, so in today's class, today's lecture 1 of ancient India. So obviously, I'm not going to straight away start talking about Harappan civilization or say Mauryas or anything like that. We are going with this particular textbook, Ancient India textbook for class 11 by uh, R.S. Sharma sir. Okay, and this one is actually say a prescribed or a very preferred text for UPSC Ancient India. You can add certain other textbooks along with this for your prelims and mains preparation, but this basically deals with the basic ancient Indian history. Okay, and this is the old NCERT textbook, not the new one. So you can search for it or download the PDF from some online sources if you want to, read the whole thing. So again, by listening to my classes, it doesn't mean you can skip reading the textbook by yourself. Obviously, reading the book by yourself has its own advantages. So I highly recommend reading all the textbooks that I have taken by yourself in your own time. And you can use my classes as a help and support for understanding the concepts which might otherwise may seem difficult for you. All right, so let's begin. And today we are covering 3 chapters. Okay, I mean, as I have told you, very small chapters initially. So I'm clubbing 3 chapters together today. All these chapters together will give you a base. Okay, so 3 chapters. One is the importance of ancient Indian history, very basic chapter, an introductory chapter into the ancient India. Then we will be looking into the beginnings of all these things or the sources of our understanding of ancient India, followed by a geographical setting. Okay, how is Indian geography? It is not a geographical portion. We are looking into in the perspective of history. So we will be looking into the Indian natural borders of India, the peninsular India, the rivers and structures, and we will be talking about how these geographical features map or shape the Indian history and the historical relations between various parts of India. Clear? So these are the 3 chapters that we are going to look into today. So if you are new to my class, this is how it works. I will continue teaching. And if you have any queries, please feel free to put it in the YouTube live chat session. Okay, I won't be looking into the live chat always. So after about every 2 or 3 slides, I will look into the chat and I will take your questions and answer it. If I know the answer, I will immediately answer it. Otherwise, I will reply to you in the next class. Okay, but again, don't feel bad or anything if I did not attend to your question immediately, because I won't be looking into the live chat continuously. It will happen only once in 2-3 slides. Okay, so to the newcomers, welcome. To the students who are already here, welcome back. And today we are starting the Ancient Indian History by R.S. Sharma. So good evening, Tamil Selvan. Good evening, Satya Pandey. Let's begin. The importance of ancient Indian history. Okay, so today's class is again very novice level. This is an basic understanding about ancient India. So this is nothing high funda stuffs or anything. So this is basically, to give you an idea about what we are going to see in this series, in this lecture series, but very important. Okay, so introduction. So why do we study Indian history? That is the main question. The importance of ancient Indian history. Why do we study it? The answer to this question may not have anything to do with your prelims, but I assure you that it has a lot to do for your mains as well as for your interview, especially if you are history optionals. Okay, why do we study history? So history basically tells us about a lot of things. Most importantly, certain notable features that history tells us is about how, when, and where did everything develop? And while studying this particular textbook, we are focusing on human history. Okay, there is history can be the history of anything. History of planet Earth, history of universe, history of anything. Okay, history of science, history of math, history of flora, fauna. But we are interested in human history. How did we develop? Okay, we have seen certain charts and images of Charles Darwin, from humans evolving from the monkeys and all. That is not what we are going to see today, but we are going to see how the human cultures developed in the earlier periods of history. Okay, when did we actually started to have that kind of cultural lifestyle? Over the time, initially we developed, we were nomads, we lived in forests, etc., etc. But at some point in history, we started to settle down. We started to form associations. We started to elect a leader. We started to function as a society. So when did all these things happen? How did this happen? Where did this happen? These are the fundamental questions. Then, how they began undertaking agriculture, a very important question. Because agriculture is actually the mark or the hallmark of a civilization. Okay, so or say not just civilization per se, hallmark of a say colonization. Okay, I mean if you have seen the movie Martian, there is a beautiful dialogue, a very funny dialogue by Matt Damon, which says that he has finally cultivated in Mars, which means he has colonized Mars. So agriculture is considered as one of the hallmarks of colonization in our history. Anyway, how the ancient Indians discovered and utilized natural resources. So right now, we know how to create metal, beautiful vessels. You know how to create various artifacts, etc., etc. But how did we know that we can use these metals? Or how did we know where to look for them? All these are very interesting questions. Okay, you have to understand that we are talking about a time when all these are unknown to us. We don't have any idea about metals or non-metals, or we don't know what we are looking for. All we know is we have to survive. This is the kind of scenario that we are actually looking into. Then we have to see how the ancient inhabitants made arrangement for food, shelter, and transport. The fundamental, the primary requirements of life, food. Okay, I mean that would have been the only thing of value for any living creature at that time, right? Food. Everybody or every living being at that time would only be looking for food, the most fundamental thing to have life. Shelter, obviously, eventually that is also a concern. Then transport. As things evolved, there is a requirement for smooth transport, faster transport, more efficient methods of transport. So all that had to be evolved. People are not considered civilized unless they know how to write. So writing is the hallmark of civilization. Okay, so unless they know to write, you can't call that as a civilization. This is why the most ancient civilization, as far as Indian history is concerned, is Indus Valley civilization. Okay, before that, I mean, even before Indus Valley civilization, human beings did exist. Homo sapiens existed. But why don't we call them civilizations? Why? Very simple answer, they did not know to write. Indus Valley civilization, here the people have found the art of writing. I mean, this script is yet to be deciphered, but still, that pictographic script implies that the art of writing has evolved in this particular period of time. And we can call that Indus Valley is a Harappa is a Indus Valley is a civilization. Okay, we will talk about what is the difference between a civilization and a culture later on in the upcoming chapters. So we have to understand that Harappa is a culture, Indus Valley is a civilization. But in nowadays, we basically calls Indus Valley civilization as Harappan civilization also. There's no issue with that. But just for your understanding, there is a clear difference between a culture and a civilization. Okay. So, there were plenty of different types of people, races, tribes, etc., etc. throughout India. They all intermingled, which led to the evolution of a composite culture and all, etc., etc. In the medieval Indian history, we talked about composite culture. But understand that that composite culture is regarding intermingling of two different religions and maybe races also. But here we are talking about people who were born and raised in India only, but in different geographical conditions, in different circumstances, different languages, etc., etc., and coming, intermingling among themselves. Evolution of the Indian social system, very important again. Okay, the social system, and which eventually leads to the evolution of the Varna system, and then breaks down into the caste system, Jati system, etc. So how did this social setup evolve? Who determined who is the superior person in the society? Who determined who is inferior? Or I mean, what was the basis of this stupid rationale? Okay, so that we have to see. Art and architecture, a major portion which is important for prelims also, that we will see in a separate series. Art and architecture. Language, literature, also very important. Land of several, so India was basically a land of several religions. Okay, after as time went on, we already know that Hinduism is probably the most ancient of all the religions that existed in India. There is a Supreme Court judgment that actually says that Hinduism is not a religion, it is a way of life in India. So either way, Hinduism came earliest. Okay, then we also had certain other very relevant, very important religions in ancient India, which includes Jainism and Buddhism, which we have to study in depth, in detail, which we will be taking in upcoming chapters. So all these religions intermingled. So we have to study, why did Buddhism emerge? What was the cause of Jainism to come forward? What was the drawbacks of Brahmanism, which caused the evolution of Jainism and Buddhism? So all these things will be looked upon. And we will also see how eventually Brahmanism influenced Jainism and Buddhism, and how these religions went outside India and vanished within India. We also will be looking into the common lifestyles of people. Okay, what did the people eat? What did they wear? What were the utensils that they made? How were their houses constructed? What were the building materials used? How did they spend their leisure time? Right now we spend our leisure time on Facebook and Instagram. So Mark Zuckerberg came very late. So how did the people in ancient India manage to kill their time? Okay, so all these things had to be looked upon. Then obviously territorial units, very important as far as political history of ancient India is concerned. So what are the territorial divisions during those times? Right now we have nations, we have states, districts, so and so. So back in the ancient India, there was something called as Janapadas. Okay, territorial units in those times were known as Janapadas, and we have 16 of them, the Mahajanapadas. So we will be looking into them eventually. Okay, and all these, most of these are actually named after tribes. Okay, just some basic idea. These Janapadas are mostly named after the particular tribe that constitute this territorial unit. And the country of India as a whole came to be known as Aryavarta at some point of time. Okay, Aryavarta, why? Obviously because of the influence of Aryans. Aryans came to India at a particular point of time, around after the Indus Valley civilization collapsed. And since the arrival of Aryans and the the language of Sanskrit also starting to spread, India came to be known as Aryavarta. All right, then this particular term in history is actually used not to represent the India as we know today. This term has been used to represent or denote northern and central India and extended from eastern to western sea coasts. Okay, so the term Aryavarta does not actually represent the entire India as we know today. So South India is not a part of Aryavarta. So that from that itself, it's very clear that Aryavarta is that region of our country which was under the influence of the Aryans. Okay, the Dravidian system is actually not that much I mean, obviously it may have certain intermingling at some point, but Dravidian system is different from the North Indian systems. Okay, so the Indo-Aryan system which developed in North India is a bit isolated, not exactly isolated, but at least a bit different from that of the South Indian systems, or say the Northeastern systems and all. So Aryavarta is the term that denotes the Northern India and Central India. Don't forget this. Then India has also been known as Bharatavarsha. So where did we get this name Bharatavarsha? Everybody knows the answer to this one, because the name arrived from the very common name Bharata. In a, it is a name of a tribe or the tribe leader or whatever. And from that, the name Bharatavarsha emerged. And this term Bharata is seen in Rigveda as well as in Mahabharata. Okay, but the name Bharatavarsha occurs in Mahabharata and post-Gupta Sanskrit textbooks. This is also very important for prelims. Bharatavarsha does not come in Rigveda. The term Bharata is there in Rigveda, but Bharatavarsha comes only in Mahabharata and in the post-Guptan Sanskrit textbooks. All right. So India has been known through these kinds of names. Some other names like, India has been known based on the river Indus, and India has been known based on this geographical location or the religion of people here, etc., etc., to the foreigners. So foreigners also have given India certain different names that we will be studying when we study the foreigners accounts. To continue, among all the inscriptions that refers to India or that has to do anything with India, the oldest one, okay, that we find is actually an Iranian inscription, okay, concerning India, or the first mention of the word Hindu as a district on Indus was seen in Iranian inscriptions. Okay, and again, the term Hindu does not mean Hindu religion here. It only means a district, a geographical territory, a territorial unit. So during those days, back in ancient India, the term Hindu refers only to a geographical unit and it has nothing to do with religion as such. All right. So we already talked about, now I think we are talking not about this current political India, but we are talking about the Indian subcontinent as such. And Indian subcontinent consists of, India, Nepal, Bhutan, Pakistan, and, some portions of Afghanistan also. So why is this called a subcontinent? That is a geographical question. I think you already know that. But anyway, in ancient Indian history, we come across two periods when the majority of this subcontinent came under one strong political unity. There has been only two instances in ancient India where this subcontinent, or at least the most of the subcontinent, came under one political setup, where political unity has been achieved. Number one, during the time of Ashoka, and number two, during the time of Samudragupta, also known as the Indian Napoleon. Okay, so we also have some other dynasties, like Harshavardhana and all, but Harsha was the famous king of the north. Okay, that is the first sentence that we study when we talk about Harsha. Harsha is a very famous king of the north. He never managed to come down. Why? Thanks to Chalukyan ruler Pulikeshin II, who prevented Harshavardhana from crossing Narmada in the very famous Battle of Narmada. Pulikeshin II, the Chalukyan ruler, defeated the North Indian emperor Harshavardhana. So in ancient Indian history, that political unity has been achieved only twice, one under Ashoka and under Samudragupta. Okay, these are minor points, just understand them. Okay. So India came to be called as Hind in Persian and Arabic languages. Okay, Hind. It is not Hindu, but it is Hind. Hind is the term given for India by Persians and Arabians. And in post-Kushana times, Kushana is a very famous dynasty, which we will be talking about later. So in the post-Kushana times, the Iranian rulers conquered the Sindh area and named it Hindustan. Okay, it was the Iranian rulers who conquered the Sindh area and named it Hindustan. So Bharatavarsha, Aryavarta, Hind, Hindustan, Hindu, all these are terminologies that deals with India but has differences on their own. Okay, differences on who came up with the name, differences on the geographical territory that it represents. Okay, I hope, or what caused that name, etc., etc. I hope you are, understanding what I'm talking about. So there has been continuing efforts to establish a linguistic and cultural unity of India throughout Indian history. There is no doubt in that. From ancient India onwards, there has been this continuum that is trying to establish a linguistic and cultural unity. That is true, right? Even now, in the modern day, present, as of now, central government earlier had tried to make Hindi a national language and try to impose it throughout India. Did not work, but still, that there has been this continuous efforts trying to establish that kind of linguistic and cultural unity. In a way that we can say that we have achieved that cultural and linguistic unity, but at the same time we have managed to keep that diversity within that unity also. Okay, when we talk about India, we always say that India is unity with among diversity. Okay, or unity with diversity. We can also say that India is diversity with unity. That is also true. We are both. Okay, in a positive sense. I'm not talking in a negative sense. Although in negative sense also it might be true to some extent. But in ancient India, this continuous efforts to achieve that linguistic or cultural unity resulted in Prakrit becoming a very popular and more common language. Okay, Prakrit was actually the lingua franca across the major part of India back in the 3rd century BC. The language of the common man back then was Prakrit, not Sanskrit, it was Prakrit. Later on, Sanskrit acquired a much popular position and it became the language of the state and the language of the well-off or the upper sections of the society. Eventually, it became the Brahminical language and later on it declined. Okay, right now there are only few places in India which actually speaks Sanskrit. Okay, so we will be talking about more about Prakrit and Sanskrit in the upcoming sessions. So these languages, especially Sanskrit, led to the growth of literature and led to the formation of certain or led to the creation of some of the most beautiful epics, including Ramayana, Mahabharata, etc., Vedas, okay, Upanishads, Aranyakas, Brahmanas, Sutras, etc., etc. So we have to study about all of them, which we will be doing in the upcoming lessons. So we already talked about the social system and we will be seeing how it developed in the upcoming classes. But eventually we know that in North India, something called the Varna and caste system developed. Okay, and this system eventually spread throughout the country. And later on, when more and more religions came to India from outside, these religions also were influenced by the existing Varna system or existing caste system. There has been a lot of give and takes between the religions which came from outside and those that were indigenously developed in India. Okay, so this is the introduction. This is what we are going to study about in this series of lectures. We are talking about political setup. We will be looking into the cultural aspects, society. We will be looking into economy, very important. We will be looking into the political setup, the major dynasties that ruled India at that time. Okay, etc., etc. We will be looking into the behavioral patterns and and how agriculture became a practice, how Harappan civilization flourished, what are the causes of its decline. All these things will be taken up in the upcoming lessons. So, continuing, construction of ancient Indian history. This is the second chapter. Okay, I already told you today is an introduction section. So the first chapter is very basic, an introduction to or just to give you a direction on what we are going to look up in the upcoming sessions. Okay, so the construction of ancient Indian history. So how do we construct ancient Indian history? So from here onwards, it's important for your prelims also, important for your mains. So pay close attention. Obviously, in order to understand something that has happened about 3000 or 4000 years ago, we need sources. We need material remains. There are plenty of sources from which we can construct history. Archaeologists and historians has been trying to find out more and more sources, okay, to construct the ancient Indian history. So obviously, you know what most of the sources are. It includes numismatics or coins. It includes, say, stone inscriptions, temple remains, okay, remains of architectural structures, which all can be together called as archaeological remains. Then literature. Okay, during ancient India, if we are talking about Harappa and all, we do not have any literature. But from the Vedic time onwards, we have some literature also to look forward to. Okay, so all these things contribute our material remains of ancient India. So stone temples in South India, brick monasteries in eastern part of India, along with the North Indian temples. So what did these archaeologists do to achieve these sources? How did they find out these sources? Usually what happens is there are two ways in which archaeologists tries to find out or tries to discover these kinds of remains. One method is known as vertical digging, other one is known as horizontal digging. Okay, so archaeologists will, once they identify a particular site, they will go there. A team of archaeologists will go there, and they can either dig the site vertically or they can dig it horizontally. Horizontal digging is not much used because it is highly costly and it is not that much productive. But as far as vertical digging is concerned, it is highly efficient and very important for history because it helps us to set a chronology. Okay, just think about it. The oldest things will always be at the bottom. Correct, right? So the things that were there during the time of Harappan civilization might be underneath towards the bottom level of that vertical dig. And as we come up towards the surface, newer and newer things will be found. Okay, so this will help us to arrange history in a chronological fashion. That is why vertical digging is so much important for identifying and studying archaeological remains. So even if we are digging and we are finding out certain things, still a lot of history is lost because preserving all these things depends a lot on a variety of factors. One of the most important one being climate and weather. That is true, right? We come to know a lot about Indus Valley region and say, the cultures and all that existed in northwestern part of India and western part of India compared to that existed in eastern part of India. Why? Very simple. The reason is that in the northwest India, the condition or the climate is pretty much dry. The dry, arid climate in the western to Uttar Pradesh and towards the northwestern part of India helped to preserve a lot of these archaeological remains as such, while it is not so easy in the eastern Indian region. Why? Because of the moisture present in the soil, because of the humid climate and the constant influence of the monsoonal systems in India. These things are not preserved. It is easily corroded and foliated and it goes away. This is also one of the reasons why we know a lot about Indus Valley civilization and not that much on the Eastern Indian, on the contemporary Eastern Indian history. Okay, so from those diggings that we have excavated, we have understood or we have learned to understand to make sense of them. We have started to identify the layout of the settlements, the types of pottery that were used, which is very important for our UPSC. Okay, because pottery is associated with a particular timeline. Okay, the red and gray ware is associated with a particular period in history. Okay, the black polished ware is associated with a particular period. The similarly, there is a particular kind of pottery that is associated with a particular time in history. So in that fashion, we have to study about pottery at depth. Okay, then if we come to South India, we find a very different kind of excavation. Okay, pottery, archaeological remains, layout settlements, drainage patterns, these are common everywhere. Tools, okay, tools used by ancient men, ancient people. The cereals they ate, food grains, all these are very, more common in most of the archaeological areas in the world. But in South India, we come across a very particular kind of excavation named as megaliths. So what is this megalith? We will talk about this later in a different chapter. But a very basic understanding, mega means large and lith means stone. Okay, so basically megalith means large stone. So those structures that were erected using large stones were known as megaliths. And in Deccan and southern India, megaliths were specifically used for burials. All right, and this can be seen in these regions. We see the life of people from the Iron Age onwards. Okay, we will study that. We come to know a lot more about South India from Iron Age rather than a period before that. We will look into the reasons of that in the upcoming chapters. Don't worry. But anyway, this is one particular kind of very interesting burial, interesting excavation that we find in South India. All right. So the science that enable us to systematically dig the successive layers of old mounds and to form an idea of the material life of people is known as archaeology. So that is the definition of archaeology. Okay, it is a system, and that science that enables us to systematically dig the successive layers of old molds and to form an idea of material life of the people. So you have to dig in a particular systematic fashion, and you have to make sense of what we discover. All right, all these things are very important. If you just Google regarding some archaeological excavations that happened recently, you will see that this is not just digging. Okay, it's not just simply taking some tools and going into some ground and start to dig. It's not like that. It's very important. Why? Because again, as I have told you, archaeology in history, archaeology is a particular part of it. And within archaeology also there are certain divisions. Okay, there is that branch that deals with biological remains. There is that part that deals with historical, say metallic remains. That part deals with stone remains. So while you dig a particular archaeological site, you have to be ready to accept and to preserve any kind of remains that you find, right? So if you are looking for something metallic, then you should be able to preserve that thing as it is observed. The moment it comes into contact with air, it will start reacting. It is a metal, so obviously it will start oxidizing. Okay, and reactions will happen and it will destroy your studies. So you should know how to preserve that. If you are looking for grains or biological remains or fossils, again you have to be very careful. These are calcareous deposits. Okay, so it has its own methods. The moment it comes to contact with air, again it also will start reacting and cause all kinds of chemical reactions. So basically archaeology and archaeological surveys that are conducted by Archaeological Survey of India and its affiliate agencies all study and try to find more of these kinds of evidences which uncovers more and more about ancient India. So once these utensils are uncovered, the next thing is to date them. Okay, you know that based on the geographical area, you know that since we got this particular item from here, this should have some relation with that particular geographical territory. But so we can place that utensil in geographical unit, but we also have to place that particular unit in a temporal scale or a time scale. In what time of history did that particular material arrive into the picture? That is also very important. And among other methods, the most important and most reliable method used by the archaeologists, I won't say most reliable, but the most prominent and say most common method used by the archaeologists used to identify the date or to place that particular item in history is known as radiocarbon dating. I think all of you know what radiocarbon dating is. It is actually using an isotope of carbon to analyze the how old a particular archaeological finding is. Okay, so from that we can identify the say how old a particular item is. Now archaeology does not, or say history does not deal simply with these kinds of utensils and pots and all. It also deals with the climate, the patterns of climate that existed there. If we can identify the climate, then we can analyze the rain patterns. We can analyze if an area was fertile, if it had adequate water supply. Okay, if a population would have lived there. All right. So based on, if you can study more and more about climatology of ancient India, that would definitely help you in improving your say observations in ancient Indian history. So history of climate and vegetation is also very important. How do we study about history of these things? How can we know what kind of climate existed 3000 years back? Right? It's a very curious question. So this can be identified through the examination of plant residues, especially through a technique called pollen analysis. Not important for us. The details are not important for us. But by using these techniques, we can understand the climate history of India. Once you observe that, then we can identify that agriculture was practiced in Rajasthan and Kashmir as early as 7000 to 6000 BC. Okay, the climatic factors were very favorable for agriculture, and even in Rajasthan, which is an arid region or at least a semi-arid region, and in Kashmir, which is towards the Himalayas, even in those regions, agriculture was practiced during this period. Similarly, observing the animal bones will help us to identify if animals has been domesticated. There is a clear difference between the bone structure of a domesticated animal and a wild animal. There is a clear difference between the dental records of a domesticated animal and a wild animal. Okay, I mean the zoological historians, okay, the people who study the zoological findings from history, those people know how to make sense of all these things. Clear? So domestication of animals, when did that happen? Which all animals were domesticated? All these things can be identified by studying the fossils of animals that we find in archaeological excavations. So again, like all these things that I have mentioned, there are other categories also. For example, you have geological studies, biological studies, and using these two, we can eventually arrive at a comprehensive picture of human history. It is not possible to completely study human history by isolating it from geological studies and biological studies. These two are very important as far as the study of human history is concerned. So it is a package. You can't study one without studying the other. It is interlinked. Okay, it's just like we say today, we study about zoonotic diseases. Okay, we can't study about zoonotic diseases by focusing only on human beings, because the origin of these diseases are in animals. Similarly, here also it is more like an interlinked structure. So we have to study all these things together. So we will see that also. When we study about Harappan civilization, for example, we will definitely be looking into the human history of Harappa. But we will also talk about Harappan geological factors. We will also talk about climatic factors, biological factors, etc. etc. So among all the archaeological observations and findings, the most important or most obvious one are the coins. Okay, I hope, I mean, at least some of you might have a coin collection from, various times. I had one when I was younger, still have one, small collection. So coins help us to understand a lot about history in many ways. Okay, maybe not the oldest coins. Okay, the old punchmark coins, which we will be looking into later. From that, we can't exactly identify a king or anything. But eventually, once the coins started to get more and more inscribed on, okay, more and more detailed, then we come to have an understanding about the person who ruled that the dynasty which was in power, etc., etc. Okay, so the study of these coins are known as, or is known as, numismatics. Right? So in those times, obviously, you know that the currency was not made of paper. The arrival of paper currency happened very later, only after paper was invented. Okay, so it came very late. So during those times, the primary articles used for currency was metal coins, which were made of copper, silver, gold, and lead. These four were the prime metals used for coin making. Okay, these four are not the only metals for coin making, but these four were the major ones. And we also discovered some coin molds in the Kushana period. Okay, you know what a mold is, right? You can make the mold first, and then you can pour the liquid metal and it will form the shape of a coin. So that is a mold. So we can find coin molds made of burnt clay from in the Kushana period. Okay, and if we observe ancient Indian history, the historians has found that the use of such molds in the post-Gupta period has virtually disappeared. So what does that mean? One inference that we can make from this observation is that in the post-Gupta period, there has been a lack of certain metals, or there could be a decline in commerce and trade, etc., etc. Right? Otherwise, coin molds should still be, or at least some forms of molds should be there. The disappearance of these coin molds points to certain economic drawbacks. Okay, this is how historians infer certain things from all these things. Understood? So, in those times, back in ancient India, there was nothing like a modern day banking system, and people you did not deposit these coins in any where you can get interest or anything. So mostly they put all their valuable coins and all inside a pot, which is made up of earth or maybe made up of a metal, say copper, and they dug it probably inside their own house. Okay, so that is why even after all these times, when a particular area is dug, you will accidentally may come across a pot filled with various coins and all, and which are used for studying or making sense of ancient India. Most of these things were unearthed during the time of British. Most of the archaeological findings that we know right now were actually conducted or made during the time of British era. British, once they came here and colonized India, there were British civil servants who were interested in archaeology, and there were British historians also. They were interested to study a lot about Indian civilization and all for various reasons. And they found a lot of excavations and they found a lot of artifacts. Most of them were taken back into Britain, and it is available in the British National Museum and all. Some of them are still available in India. We have the Kolkata Museum, we have some in Mysore, etc. etc. Okay, and still, even now, people are unearthing new and new things every day that we see occasionally in the news. So, our earliest coins, okay, among all the coins that we have, the earliest ones, were actually those having a few symbols. Okay, I mean, we can't make much out of these symbols. Some are yet to be deciphered anyway. Okay, the Panchma coins, basically. Some symbols that doesn't make too much sense to us. Then later on, it started to become more and more clearer. It started to become more and more intricate. We find the figures of kings, those of divinities, also the mentions of names and dates, etc. etc. So once these kinds of more and more detailed descriptions started to come up in coins, we were able to place them in a historical time scale, and it has become easier for us to reconstruct the history of several ruling dynasties. Okay, so this is how numismatics helps us in studying ancient India. Some of the coins were actually issued by guilds of merchants and goldsmiths. So from this, we can understand that these kinds of guilds and guilds of merchants and goldsmiths, they had that kind of credibility in ancient India, right? Obviously, striking coins is something considered as very much, uh, say, exclusive to the sovereign, right? In India, right now, the currency is issued by the Reserve Bank of India, and the coins by signature in the coins are by the finance ministry officials. Okay, so only concerned agencies are allowed to mint coins. But there are evidences that in ancient India, guilds of merchants and goldsmiths were allowed to issue coins, or say at least mint coins. So from this we can identify the social position of the guilds of merchants and goldsmiths. Needless to say, all these coins and this form of currency has helped in transactions on a large scale. So when in our younger classes, we have learned a lot about the barter system. Before the arrival of the notion of the concept money, okay, the notion of coins and currency as such, there existed the barter system. So barter system had a huge, lot of limitations of its own, because the exact value of an item cannot be measured. But once the coins came into the picture, it helped us to measure the value of a lot of things in relation to something that is standard. Okay, so this helped to the evolution of trade, commerce, and eventually the economy as such. The largest number of Indian coins dates to post-Mauryan period. Very important for your prelims. Largest number of Indian coins dates to the post-Mauryan period. And these are made of lead, potin, copper, bronze, silver, and gold. Okay, all these are important. If the UPSC asks a question, which of the following metals were used for making coins? And if you see suddenly, potin is there, you might get confused. Actually, there were potin coins also, don't forget. There were coins of lead, 14 copper, bronze, silver, and gold. Okay, and among all the major Indian dynasties in ancient India, the Guptas were the ones who issued the largest number of gold coins. Largest number, very careful. I'm not saying the highest purity of gold coins. I'm only saying the largest number. Highest purity of gold coins in ancient India has been issued by, any idea? I think most of you already know the answer. So if you know the answer, put it in the live chat. Okay, the highest purity of gold coins in ancient India has been issued by whom? Okay, I mean the dynasty. I'm not asking about a particular king. I'm asking about a dynasty. Anyway, the largest number of gold coins has been issued by Guptas. But the historians has also found out that only a few coins were belonging to the post-Gupta period, uh, when discoveries were made. Okay, so the number of gold coins started to decline, and we come across only a very few number of coins in the post-Gupta period. What could this indicate? I mean, what is the inference that we can make out of this? Again, one thing that we can infer is that obviously economy collapsed, or there was a decline in economical condition and or the fiscal condition of the country. That is one. Number two, the system of transaction or the method of transaction changed. That is also possible. If the salaries of people were supposed to be paid with coins, then you need coins. You need that currency. But if the salaries were paid, say, using land grants and all, then coins become secondary, right? So coins will take a step back. So that is another inference that can be made. So this is how historians and archaeologists make sense of history. You don't have to have a coin with full details inscribed on it. By simply observing the number of findings that we have made, simply observing the type of metal, simply observing the work or the amount of effort put into making that coin, all these things tells us the story of ancient India. Among all these metals that I have already talked about, some lower value coins were actually made by cowries. Cowries, I mean, not made by cowries. Cowries itself were used for low value transactions. And they appear in very substantial numbers in post-Gupta times compared to earlier times. So lower value transactions still existed, or at least got a higher step after the Guptan collapse. Okay, so this is a very brief overview about numismatics or the importance of coins in ancient India. Next one is inscriptions. 14 refers to terracotta, or it is actually a metal kind of, not terracotta. It is a metallic kind of thing. Okay, not Sher Shah. No one. Which dynasty issued the highest purity gold coin in India? In ancient India, Sher Shah is a medieval Indian character. I'm talking about ancient India. Sher Shah is not the right answer. It is actually anyone? The highest purity gold coins in India were issued by, no, wrong, Vasudha Lakshmi. That is why I asked you to be very careful. Guptas issued the, look at the statement given here. Guptas issued the largest number of gold coins, not the highest purity gold coins. Both are different. Highest purity gold coins were issued by, no, Satya, be more careful. Yeah, I mean, you can be a bit more specific. It is actually Kushanas. Okay, I mean, we are learning. Okay, don't worry about it, Vasudha Lakshmi. We are learning. This is a session. It's not an MCQ or test or anything. Okay, you can learn. That's all. So highest purity has been issued by Kushanas. Okay, that would be a more specific answer. Okay, Satya. So inscriptions, the next important thing. So what I think you know what inscriptions are. Okay, I mean basically these are the inscribed writings of ancient rulers or various other people that we see in rocks or say in wooden structures or whatever, in temples, etc., etc. So the study of these inscriptions is known as epigraphy. Okay, so study of these inscriptions are known as epigraphy, and the study of the old writing used in the inscriptions is known as paleography. Okay, that if we study the inscription as such, it is known as epigraphy. But the study of ancient writing that we see in inscriptions, that we see in manuscripts, that we see in ancient, other forms of, say, literary works, this is known as paleography. Clear. So inscriptions are carved on seals, stone pillars, rocks, copper plates, etc., temple walls, and all. We will study about all kinds of inscriptions, some of them in detail, okay, in the upcoming chapters when we talk about the respective dynasties. But India as a whole, the earliest inscriptions were recorded on stone. Needless to say, the earliest inscriptions were obviously recorded on stone. I mean, it could have been recorded on wooden, say, structures, but then we have no evidence of it because wood will disintegrate, and we have nothing of a concrete evidence of that. The thing that still survives are stone made. So we believe that in India overall, the oldest inscriptions are done on the surface of a stone, and the earliest inscriptions were made using the language Prakrit in the 3rd century BCE. And Sanskrit came to be adopted as the epigraphic medium only in 2nd century AD. Only after 500 years of the writing inscriptions did Sanskrit arrive in the picture. The earliest inscriptions are made using Prakrit language. And later on, by 9th and 10th century, by medieval Indian periods, early medieval Indian periods, inscriptions started to be composed using regional languages also. Okay, languages like Telugu, Tamil, Kannada, all these started to evolve a bit more, and we come across a lot of regional language inscriptions. Most of the inscriptions that we come across bears to the history of Maurya, post-Maurya, and Gupta periods. And these were collected together and put into a series of collections known as Corpus Inscriptionum Indicara. Okay, Corpus Inscriptionum Indicara. This actually is a collection of inscriptions of 3 major dynasties or 3 periods in Indian history: Mauryas, post-Mauryas, and Guptas. Very important, it does not include post-Guptan inscriptions. Clear? Maurya, post-Maurya, and Gupta. This is the time frame that is included in this particular collection of inscriptions. Harappan inscriptions, which we will be talking about in detail later, this is yet to be deciphered. Okay, Harappan script is yet to be deciphered. I think all of us know it very well. Yet to be deciphered, and it is when historians observed this particular inscriptions, they understood that this is not our common method of language writing or anything. This is more like a pictographic script. The script is not like the modern day script, which is alphanumeric and all. Those times, the Harappan script was pictographic in nature. What does that mean? It means it has picture-like symbols. Okay, for example, you find across the fish symbol in Harappan writings and all. It means something, but we don't know what that means. It is yet to be deciphered. Harappan scripts are not yet deciphered. The earliest deciphered script in India is Ashokan inscriptions. Okay, we will talk about it in a while. But most of the Ashokan inscriptions are actually engraved in Brahmi script. Okay, Prakrit is the language. Script is Brahmi. I hope you understand what is the difference. In the English, the language I am talking to you right now, this sound is actually the language. Okay, but if I write it A, B, C, D, etc., this is the script. The representation, the symbolic representation of the sound forms the script. So that is the difference between a language and a script. The written form or the written, the symbols that constitute this sound in the written form is the script. Okay, so the Ashokan inscriptions were predominantly written in Brahmi script, and it was written in left to right. Brahmi script is written from left to right, just like our modern day English and all. But some of the inscriptions were also seen in Kharoshthi script. This is written from right to left. Okay, right to left. So like the Arabic method of writing these days, from right towards left. So Ashokan inscriptions are written from both left to right and from right to left. The Brahmi scripts from left to right and the Kharoshthi scripts from right to left. Greek and Aramaic scripts were employed in writing Ashokan inscriptions towards Pakistan and Afghanistan. Okay, we will talk about the Kandahar inscriptions, which is the only, but not the bilingual inscriptions of Ashoka. And here we can see, especially in the region of Pakistan and Afghanistan, we can see Ashokan inscriptions employed in Greek and Aramaic scripts. But in the major portion of Indian subcontinent, Brahmi was the most prevalent method of inscriptions. Okay, until the times we see that Brahmi is the most used scriptic language. So for Indian history, okay, be very careful here and try to understand me very carefully. For Indian history, earliest deciphered script inscriptions are Irani. Okay, as far as study of Indian history is concerned, the earliest deciphered inscriptions are actually from Iran, Iranian origin. They belong to 6th to 5th century BC and are found in Iran. They appear in the old Indo-Iranian and also in the Semitic languages in cuneiform script. It is another type of script, not too much important for us. So it is seen in old Indo-Iranian and Semitic language in the cuneiform script. And it speaks about the Iranian conquest of Hindu or the Sindhu region. So be very careful again. I'm talking about study of Indian history. And this is the earliest inscriptions that deals with study of Indian history. But this inscription is found in Iran, not in India. But when we come to India, the earliest deciphered inscriptions are from Ashoka. Okay, is that clear? Is that absolutely clear? As far as Indian history is concerned, the earliest deciphered inscription is found in Iran. But the earliest deciphered inscription within India is found in Ashokan inscriptions. Two of the Ashokan inscriptions were actually found during the time of Firoz Shah Tughlaq. One in Meerut and the other one in Topra in Haryana. And it is actually Firoz Shah Tughlaq who took these two pillars into Delhi. Okay, and Firoz Shah Tughlaq asked his historians and his court to try to decipher it, but they couldn't do it. It was actually the British archaeologist and historian James Prinsep who finally managed to decipher the Ashokan inscriptions, and Ashokan inscriptions remains the earliest deciphered inscriptions within India as far as ancient Indian history is concerned. Okay, so what does these inscriptions include? Is it simply royal orders? Ashokan inscriptions. Okay, when we talk about inscriptions, the first thing that comes to our mind is Ashokan inscriptions. So does that mean Ashokan inscriptions deals with, say, only royal orders to the people? It deals with a lot of things. Some of these inscriptions, most of them are obviously royal orders. Some of them are actually decisions regarding social, religious, and administrative matters to the officials and to the general public. Most of the Ashokan inscriptions belong to this category, royal orders and decisions that pertain to the society at that time. Then there are other inscriptions that deals with religion, the spread of religion. The votive records of the followers of Buddhism, Jainism, Vaishnavism, Shaivism, and so on. There are another kind that deals with eulogies. Okay, eulogy means what? The eulogy, I think it is basically something that is written about something else. At the same time, say for example, it might deal with a war, it might deal with praising someone. Okay, so it actually eulogizes the attribute and achievements of kings and conquerors and ignore their defeats or weaknesses. So basically, it's an exaggeration. You can praise different people using these kinds of eulogies and exaggerations. Best example, Allahabad Pillar inscription of Samudragupta. Okay, this is one of the deciphered inscriptions. Only problem is this is just praising Samudragupta. Okay, this cannot be taken as a 100% authentic historical work. This is more or less a praise to the king, a flattery. So my question to you, who is the author of Allahabad pillar inscription as far as Samudragupta's portion in that pillar is concerned. Who wrote this particular inscription? Okay, Allahabad pillar inscription has more inscriptions. It is not just associated with Samudragupta. It is associated with certain other kings also. But who wrote the Samudragupta's portion in this pillar? That is the question. Next one. We have, apart from these kinds of inscriptions, there are other inscriptions also. For example, we have inscriptions that indicate donative records, which refers specifically to the gifts of money, cattle, land, etc. etc. Just like a record, okay, modern day record of sale, a transaction. Okay, these inscriptions were used as records or evidences or proofs as well. Clear? Inscriptions recording land grants made by chiefs and princes, etc. are also very important. Why? Because it helps us to understand the land system of administration, etc. etc. So if we find an inscription regarding a land grant, we can know about the kind of revenue administration. We can know about the kind of land grants. Did Brahmadeya system exist there? Was Devadana system prevalent? What was the kind of revenue assessment that was made? How was the salary paid? Was it ever paid in this method? All these can be understood using the study of inscriptions. Eventually, inscriptions started to be made on copper plates. Why? Because these are proofs of certain transactions. Okay, I told you earlier inscriptions were strictly made on stones, but later they started to be made from metals. Why? Because metals, they don't break or they don't wither away that easily. You can preserve it adequately, and it is easy to carry around also rather than a stone. So due to all these reasons, once inscriptions were started to use for indicating transactions and recordical work, they were made using metals, especially copper. We have a lot of copper plate inscriptions that deals with ancient India. Then comes literary sources. Okay, we will talk about Devanagari script. Okay, this is the Brahmi script. We will talk about Devanagari script soon, but Ashokan inscriptions are Brahmi script. Harisena, very good. Vasanthalakshmi and Satya Pandey, very good. It is Harisena who composed Samudragupta's part of Allahabad pillar inscription. Okay, so literary sources. So what are the literary sources? First of all, you have to understand that literary sources are available only from a particular point in ancient India. Okay, we do not come across literary sources from way back in history. Obvious reasons, people did not know how to write for a very long time. Okay, so you have to have the understanding of how to write, and you should also be able to preserve that writing. Then only literary sources comes to play. So the most ancient literary sources that we come across includes manuscripts. And in India, manuscripts were usually inscribed in birch bark and palm leaves. We do not have the modern day paper during those times. So birch bark and palm leaves were used for making these manuscripts. And in Central Asian scenario, there also we find some Prakrit language manuscripts, but there some other bases were also used to write these manuscripts. For example, sheep leather, wooden tablets, etc. etc. Okay, in Central Asian situation, we see sheep leather and wooden tablets also used for manuscripts. But in an Indian context, we see birch bark and palm leaves mostly. Okay, so although old Sanskrit manuscripts are found all over India, they are mostly found in South India, Kashmir, and Nepal. This is from the regions from where we find most of the old Sanskrit manuscripts. Okay, South India, Kashmir, Nepal. Okay, these are for your understanding. And most of these ancient books, most of the ancient literary works deals with religious themes. Okay, Hindu religious literature such as Vedas, Ramayana, Mahabharata, Puranas, etc. etc. It is not easy to place all these things in a chronological fashion or in a particular period of time, but still, most of the ancient ancient manuscripts or literary works were of religious in nature. If we take Rig Veda is the oldest of all these works. Okay, Ramayana, Mahabharata, Vedas and all. Rigveda is the oldest one among all these literary works. So Rigveda actually comprises of prayers. Okay, it solely comprises of prayers. But the later Vedic texts, the Yajurveda, Samaveda, Atharva Veda, etc., these comes later on and has certain other aspects also. For example, along with prayers, we also see a lot of ritualistic practices, magic, mythological stories, etc., that comes in the the textbooks that were written later in a later period. Clear? We will study about this in detail later, but for now, just keep that in mind. In Rig Veda, it was more or less confined to prayers. But since then, in the other Vedas and in other Puranas and all, we see a lot of ritual, magic, mythological stories, so and so. Upanishads is an exception. Okay, as far as Upanishads are concerned, they deal with philosophical speculations. Okay, how did this universe origin, or I mean, what is our destiny, and these kinds of very complex questions, philosophical questions. Upanishads deals with these kinds of philosophical questions. Some of them we have to understand and study in detail. That will be done later. Okay, this slide is a bit crampy, but don't worry about it. Simple points. I'm just going to read through them. So while we study Vedas, there is a particular portion of Veda called as Vedanga. Vedanga literally translates to the limbs of Vedas. Okay, the limbs of Vedas. That is the literal translation of the word Vedanga. So this basically supplements the Veda and is comprised of phonetics or shiksha, ritual or kalpa, grammar, vyakarana, etymology, nirukta, metrics, chanda, astronomy, jyotisha. These are the Vedangas. Okay, shiksha, kalpa, vyakarana, nirukta, chanda, and jyotisha. These are the Vedangas, limbs of Vedas. So these are also studied along with the Vedas to understand Vedas properly. Clear? And they were all written in the form of precepts in prose. What is a precept? Precept was, in ancient India, precept was actually called as a sutra. Okay, because of its brevity, it's a very concise thing, and this is used for understanding the bigger picture of Vedas. And the most famous example of this writing is the grammar of Panini. So my next question, which is the very most famous grammatical work of Panini. Okay, so once you understand these precepts, once you understand these sutras, it will be easier for you to understand the bigger picture conveyed through Vedas. So Vedangas are important in that manner. So you can expect a question. I mean, if you a possible question for prelims is try to match different things. Phonetics is known as shiksha. Ritual is kalpa. So you should be able to identify the English name and the ancient Sanskrit name for the same. Grammar vyakarana is very easy. Etymology nirukta is easy. Astronomy jyotisha is easy. But other things a bit difficult to keep in mind. So take your time and by heart them. Among all the epics, okay, the most prominent ones are Mahabharata and Ramayana. Among these two, historians believe that Mahabharata which is attributed to Vyasa, is the older one. Okay, and they think that Mahabharata actually is attributed to a period of 10th century BCE to 4th century AD. I'm not saying that it was written during this period. I'm saying that Mahabharata refers to this period of time in ancient history. 10th century BC to 4th century AD. So a period of around, say, 1400 years. Okay, so originally, the original version of Mahabharata had about 8,800 verses. And it was called as Jaya. So another prelims question. Another other name of Mahabharata is actually Jaya Kavya. Jaya Kavya is Mahabharata. Okay, so it was actually the story of the Kauravas and Pandavas and the story of victory of Pandavas over Kauravas. So that is why it is known as Jaya Kavya. Alright, later on, there were amendments made into this original textbook and the number of verses were taken up to 24,000 from the earlier 8,800. And now it came to be known as Bharata. Why? Again, because it contains or it deals with the stories of the descendants of the tribe of Bharata. We already talked about the Bharata tribe from which India got the name Bharatavarsha. And since the Kauravas and Pandavas and this Kuru tribe emerged from or are the descendants of Bharata, because of that reason, the 24,000 verse Mahabharata, verse story, Jayakavya, got the name Bharata. Then again, this was again extrapolated into a huge book, an epic, which is commonly known as Mahabharata, which contains around 1 lakh or 100,000 verses and came to be known as Mahabharata or the Shata Sahasri Samhita. Sahasram means what? 1000. Shatam means 100. So Shata Sahasri Samhita means a Samhita having 100,000 verses. Okay, so the 100,000 versed Mahabharata is known as Shata Sahasri Samhita. So basically all this refers to the same book. Okay, in layman's terms, Mahabharata, Jayakavya, Shata Sahasri Samhita, all these things are one and the same. Now, the other epic is Ramayana. Obviously, we all know that it was written by Valmiki, the original textbook. Okay, the first textbook was written by Valmiki, and the original textbook only contained 6,000 verses. But again, later it was revised to 12,000 verses, and eventually it was extrapolated into 24,000 verses. Historians believe that Ramayana was a composition that was started in the 5th century BC. After that, it passed through as many as 5 stages. And the last final Ramayana, as we see today, has been a creation of as late as 12th century AD. The original textbook is as old as 5th century BC, and the final progression and the final stage of Ramayana, as we see today, is actually something that was created or culminated in the 12th century AD. Okay, so in the post-Vedic period, we have a lot of ritualistic literature as well. Okay, we will study that in the early Vedic times, the ritualistic aspect was very low, but eventually this Tantricism and Brahmanism comes into play, and a lot of ritualistic practices also starts to come up. So naturally, the literature associated will also see a rise. So in the post-Vedic society, we see a huge deal of ritual literature. Best example, Shrauta Sutras. Shrauta Sutras are actually, that deals with royal coronation ceremonies and such, other things that deals with royalty and high funda people and all. Okay, Shrauta Sutras deals with ceremonies that are to be conducted during royal coronation, such big yagas and yajnas and all. Then you have a set of rules or ritualistic aspects that deals with your home, domestic rituals, which are contained in another set of books known as Grihya Sutras. Very easy to remember. Griham means home. So Grihya Sutra means those ritualistic practices that deals with our home. For example, the naming ceremony, the ceremony that is associated with the birth of a person. Investiture. What is investiture? That sacred thread. Okay. Then marriage, funerals. All these have certain religious ceremonies that are associated with it, right? Even now, we go through all these kinds of ritualistic practices during these kinds of occasions in one's life. So these are based on certain textbooks, and those are known as Grihya Sutras. Another very important textbook that we have to bear in mind is Sulva Sutra. Sulva Sutra is essentially a book of measurements. Okay, and especially these measurements in earlier times were done using threads. You don't have a ruler or a scale at that time. So you do it with the help of a thread. That is why it is known as Sulva Sutra. And this was primarily used for measuring the dimensions of sacrificial altars, the Homakund. Okay, you know the Homakund, right? These are sacrificial fire altars. And it was primarily used for the construction and exact measurements of these altars at that time, Sulva Sutra. And historians believe that this is actually the beginnings of the study of geometry and mathematics as such. Sulva Sutra is one of the earliest textbooks that deals with geography and mathematics as such. Now, as far as the ancient Buddhist literatures are concerned, most of them were obviously written in Pali. Pali is actually a form of Prakrit. Okay, so if a question comes in UPSC asking that earliest Buddhist works were written in which of the following languages? Option A Sanskrit, B Pali, C Prakrit, D Hindi. Okay, you have to go for Pali. Don't go for Prakrit. Why? Because Pali is the most accurate answer. That is what UPSC looks for. Clear? If there is an option both A and B, it's fine. You can go for both A and B. But still, I mean, Prakrit is Pali is actually a form of Prakrit. So go for Pali always. If Pali is an option, go for Pali. If Pali is not there, then go for Prakrit. Okay. So most of the ancient Buddhist literature were done in Pali language. They were compiled in the 1st century BC in Sri Lanka, not in India. Okay. But the canonical portions reflect the state of affairs in India in the age of Buddha. So one thing you will learn later is that this canonical textbook of Buddhism, the Pitakas, Sutta Pitaka, Vinaya Pitaka, Abhidhamma Pitaka, etc., they were actually written after the death of Buddha. Okay, not during the time of Buddha. They were written after the death of Buddha. And these textbooks deals a lot with the philosophy of Buddha, the rules and regulations given to the monks, the teachings of Buddha, etc., etc. So these are the canonical portions, the religious laws and all. So canonical portions deals with the state of affairs in India, although most of them were compiled in Sri Lanka. Clear? And there are non-canonical literatures also associated with religion. Okay, non-canonical means what? Not regarding the laws of religion. So for example, stories. Okay, best example, Jataka tales. Jataka tales are non-canonical forms of literature that deals with Buddhism. Here, the tales are associated with religion, obviously, but still it has nothing to do with core religious rules and regulations. These are stories about the previous lives of Buddha and etc. that we tell children and all, right? But even then, it is important. Why? Because these are not mere stories. Obviously, maybe this is a work of fiction, or maybe we can say it's a work of belief and faith of the religion. But still, from these works, we can know a lot about the social and economic conditions of the period that is being depicted in that book. That is true, right? Just think about Manusmriti. Okay, back in ancient India, Manusmriti was one of the textbooks that was very strictly followed, at least by Hindu kingdoms. Okay, but in modern India, we see that Dr. B.R. Ambedkar burns a copy of Manusmriti. So this Smriti, this law book, was so popular or so strictly followed in ancient India and basically rejected in modern India, at least by a section of society. So from this, we can understand that there are certain things that are transferable to the modern times and certain things that are not transferable to the modern times. Law books deals a lot with society of that time. Okay, so Manusmriti, Narada Smriti, Yajnavalkya Smriti, all these are law books. We can't use those books in modern times. I mean, not completely at least. Because these are laws and regulations. It has to deal with the society. And these books never underwent any revisions after a particular point of time. So they are not adapted to the modern days. Indian Constitution, another book. Okay, that was written in 1950, but still we use it. Why? After 70 years, still that is a very valid document. Why? Because Indian Constitution is a living document. It undergoes changes. It undergoes amendments to reflect the changes in the society. Unlike Manusmriti or Narada Smriti, Indian Constitution is a living document. It is still evolving. Okay, so these are some interesting points that you can use for your mains exam. So anyway, we come across many non-canonical literatures also in ancient India. And then just like Buddhism, we have textbooks regarding Jainism, which were written in Prakrit language. Jain textbooks are also written in another common language, Artha Magathi. Artha Magathi language is also used a lot to write Jain textbooks. Okay, and the compilation of the Jain textbooks were actually done in Vallabhi in Gujarat. We will study about that later in detail. I'm just mentioning it here, that's all. So among these canonical and non-canonical textbooks, we also have secular literature, which includes Dharma Sutras, Smritis, etc. The law books that I just talked about. Okay, so Dharma Sutras and Smritis are together known, along with their commentaries, as Dharma Shastras. Okay, there are certain Smritis which are law books, and there are commentaries on these Smritis. Okay, there are people who comment it on the law book that was written by someone else. So the commentary along with the law book together forms Dharma Shastras. That's the difference between Dharma Sutra and Dharma Shastra. One of the most famous books in the field of administration is Arthashastra, written by Kautilya. Okay, we are not sure if it is entirely written by Kautilya. Historians believe otherwise, but still the major author is Kautilya. Then we have another book, secular book known as Ashtadhyayi, written by Panini, the very famous Sanskrit grammatist. I asked a question regarding that earlier. The book name is Ashtadhyayi. Then Patanjali's commentary on Panini. Patanjali also has written another book known as Mahabhasya. Okay, we will study about all that in the upcoming chapters. Then we have the beautiful works of Bhasa, Shudraka, Kalidasa, Vanabhatta, and all. Abhignana Shakuntalam, Vikramorvashiyam, Malavyagramitram, Mridusamharam, Kalidasa's works. Okay, so you have to study all those 4 prelims, which will all come eventually. But please try to make a list of the books written by Kalidasa and study about it. Okay, ancient literature sources, ancient literary works, who were their authors, very important for your prelims. Among these literature is another very important one, Sangam literature. Sangam literature is actually a South Indian literature that deals with the Tamil region, Tamil Nadu region. And this literature were actually constructed by a group of people called Sangam. Okay, and it consists of 8 anthologies known as Ettu Tokkai. Ettu means 8. Okay, in Malayalam and Tamil, Ettu means 8. So, Ettu Tokkai means 8 anthologies. And this is actually a group of 8 anthologies collected in groups of hundreds, such as Purananuru, that is the 400 of the exterior, and the Pattupat, the 10 songs. Pattu means 10. So, Pattupat means 10 songs. Clear? And according to, I missed here. It is not, it's collected as a group of 100, groups of 100, which is known as Purananuru. And this is actually in 2 main groups. One is Pattupattu and other is Pathinengil Kanaka, the 18 lower collections. Sorry, I missed that statement. That is why I got a bit confused there, because Purananuru is the collection of the 100 group of hundreds. And it is actually divided into 2 main groups. One is Pathinengil Kanaka, other one is Pattupattu. Okay, and historians believe that Pathinengil Kanaka is the older version, older one compared to Pattupattu. Now, Sangam texts are different from Vedic texts. Why? They are particularly different from Rig Veda because they do not constitute religious literature. Sangam textbooks are not religious works. Okay, they refer mainly to many secular themes. Okay, they refers to certain maybe goddesses, gods and all, but still it's not a religious work as such. Sangam they refers to certain methods of life, certain good qualities, etc. etc. Sangam texts refer to many settlements, including Kaveri Pattanam. They speak about Yavanas. Yavana means foreigner. Okay, when the term Yavana in ancient India means foreigner. Eventually, that same term was used to denote Greeks. Greeks were also called by the term Yavana. Then, Europeans also, and okay, in some point of time, it eventually came to be used for calling all the foreigners. For example, Portuguese people were also called as Yavanas. Mostly Europeans were called as Yavanas at some point of time. So we come across various foreigners coming to India, various kinds of settlements in various towns in India, etc., from Sangam literature. Sangam literature is a major source of information for the social, economic, and political life of people in the Tamil Nadu region in the early Christian centuries. So basically, it is a kind of literature that is focused on the South Indian setup. We will study more about it at a later point. Say Ilangovadigal, Tirukkural, Tiruvalluvar, all these are important terms and peoples and books in those times. Chilappadigaram by Ilangovadigal. Okay, I think you already know all these things, but we have to look into it at some point of time, and that we will do that in the upcoming chapters. So only a few more things to say today. Foreigners' accounts. Yes, we consider Ramayana and Mahabharata also to decode ancient history. Okay, obviously, anything is a source for our study. We do not take everything literally. Obviously, we cannot do that. But still, we do not have to accept or treat anything, say, take it in literary meaning as such. Okay, we do not have to believe a religion or anything to look into Ramayana and Mahabharata. You can actually take it as a source of history and use it to study the society and say economy of those times. It is possible. Okay, we study about this particular person called Sri Rama. I mean, Sri Rama is actually depicted as a human being, not as a god. In Valmiki's Ramayana, Sri Rama is actually represented as a human being. Okay, so from his perspective, what is actually Sri Rama is constructed, the character of Sri Rama is constructed as a very, say, the perfect son, the perfect, say, maybe husband, perfect ruler, etc., etc., the perfect man, right? So from that we can understand what was the concept of a perfect man in those times. What was the concept of the kingdom at that times? What was the concept of being a raja or being a ruler at that time? So all that things we can study from all these kinds of, say, books. Okay. Then Pali was form of Prakrit, how it is different and why Pali was not famous among common people in those times. It's not like that. Pali is it is more of a common man's language. Okay, Pali, I already told you, most of the Buddhist works were written in Pali. Buddhism emerged as a reaction to Brahmanism. Sanskrit was becoming a very dominant language, and it is a language of the higher class people. Pali is a form of, Prakrit is the more common language. Pali is a form of it. And Buddhist works were mostly written in Pali because Pali was more common in Sri Lanka, and most of these Buddhist canonical works were written in Sri Lanka. All right, although it refers to the Indian systems and all. Then, which literary works can be considered first secular book regarding life in ancient India? First secular book is hard to say. I will look into it. I'm not sure which is the first secular book as such, but say Smritis and Arthashastra are all secular. Okay, so I don't know which one exactly is the first secular work in ancient India. I will look into it and get back to it. Anyway, foreigners' accounts. So far we talked everything that we have talked about are, say, indigenous works. Okay, now we are going to see some of the foreign accounts. Obviously, there were plenty of travelers to India. There were travelers from Greeks, Romans, Chinese, etc., etc. From their accounts, we find a lot about Indian history. Alexander's invasion to India is not recorded in any Indian historical work. Okay, very curious. Alexander's invasion has not been depicted in any Indian indigenous work. The only source to study Alexander's invasion is based on Greek sources. Clear? Greek writers mention Sandrocotas, a contemporary of Alexander the Great, who invaded India in 326 BC. So the Greeks say that there is a king named Sandrocotas who was there in India, a contemporary of Alexander, and when Alexander invaded India in 326 BC. From native literature, from indigenous literature, we know that in this time, India was ruled by the very famous king Chandragupta Maurya. So if the Indian king is a contemporary of Alexander, then we can put together it that Sandrakotas is none but other than Chandragupta Maurya. This is another way how we construct history. We get some info from somewhere else, we get some info from another region, we combine it together and make sense out of it. Okay, so another very famous foreign historian, traveler to India is Megasthenes, who wrote the very famous book Indica. He visited the court of Chandragupta Maurya, but please be very careful. Indica is not at all a perfect work of history. Plenty of mistakes are there in Indica. Megasthenes wrote whatever he saw, but he did not clearly observe the Indian society at that time. That is obvious. Megasthenes says that there was no slavery in India, but clearly there was slavery in India at that time. Okay, then another very famous book is Periplus of Erythraean Sea. It is unknown who wrote that particular book. It is an anonymous author. The whole book is not available to us. A portion of it is lost. But Periplus of Arthurian Sea is a very useful book. Ptolemy's Geography, okay, both written in Greek, is provides valuable data about the Indian geographical system and commerce, etc., etc. Pliny's Naturalis Historia, very important book again to study the natural history of uh, from a Greek perspective. And the last Greco-Roman scholar who came to India was called as Cosmos Indicopleus. Okay, he was the last Greek scholar who came to India in the ancient Indian period. Cosmos Indicopleustes. He hailed from Alexandria, which is a place in Egypt. These are prelims points, just understand that and move on. And as far as the Chinese travelers are concerned, so from here onwards, our interest starts. Fahian and Huansang. We will study more about them when we talk about Mauryan dynasty and Gupta dynasty and Vardhana dynasty. At that time, we will study about these two people. But for now, just understand that such travelers came from all over the world to India. Puranas provide dynastic rule up to the beginning of Gupta rule. So some of the later Puranas were actually written during the time of Guptas. So as far as the Puranas are concerned, we come to know up to the period of Guptas from these Puranas. There are 18 Puranas in total, and using these Puranas, we can identify or we can study about the society and other aspects of ancient India up till Buddhas, including some time of Guptas. Okay. Also, in history, we come across a lot of peculiar years. For example, several eras were started in history in order to commemorate various events. For example, the Vikrama Samvat began in the year 57 to 58. Why is that particular year chosen to begin this Vikram Samvat? We will study later when we study that chapter. Then we have the Shaka Samvat, which started in the AD 78. Okay, the Shaka era, it starts in the 78th year of Anno Domini. Then you have the Gupta era, which started in AD 319. So please be very careful about these years, very important. Vikrama Samvat started in 57 to 58 BC. It is the oldest among all the three. Then Shaka Samvat or the Shaka era, which started in the 78 AD. And finally the Gupta era, which started in 319 AD. So from all these, we have to make some kind of historical sense. Okay, what is that historical sense? Very simple. Kharavela of Kalinga records a large number of events in his life year by year in the Hadigumbha inscriptions. Okay, so from Hadigumbha inscriptions, we can identify a lot about the Kharavela of Kalinga, that particular king and that particular dynasty. Similarly, biographic writings. For example, Harshacharita by Banabhatta, Sandhyagar Nandi's Ramacharita. All these narrates the stories of a particular king or a dynasty and helps us to understand a lot about them. Sandhyagar Nandi's Ramacharita actually narrates the story of conflict between Kaivarta peasants and the Pala prince Ramapala, resulting in Ramapala's victory. So we can know a lot about Palas and Kaivartas using this particular textbook. Bilhana's Vikramadeva Charita, very important to study about the history of Vikramaditya VI, a Chalukyan king of Kalyan. Mushika Vamsha, a South Indian textbook to study about the rulers of Kerala. Okay, the dynasty of Mushakas were actually located in the northern part of Kerala. And Mushika Vamsha, the book written by Atula in 11th century, helps us to understand the history of this particular dynasty. The most authentic of all the historic works is none other than Raja Tarangini, written by Kalhana, which deals with the string of biographies of the kings of Kashmir, one of the most authentic historical works in the modern day sense. No exaggerations, no flattery, nothing. Purely historical work. Raja Tarangini. Okay, so by that, we come to an end of the second chapter, and the third chapter is geographical setting. I will be taking this also. I will finish by 7 p.m., only 2 hours class. This is a very small chapter, and everything is known to all of you. We will talk about Himalayas, Vindhyas, different rivers, that's all. So I am finishing this one also today. I will finish this chapter in like 15 minutes. Okay, any questions? No. So moving on, geographical settings, introduction. So Indian history, to know the geographical history of India is very relevant for us. And India as a subcontinent, as a separate geological unit or geographical unit, emerged in some 40 million years ago. I hope you know about the oldest, uh, you know, landform and ocean form in the world, right? You know about the Pangaea and all, right? Pangaea and Panthalassa. Pangaea is the supercontinent. Okay, when the Earth began, when Earth originated, there was only one supercontinent that is known as Pangaea. Okay, there is no Asia or Europe or America or anything. It is the whole thing is as one supercontinent, that is Pangaea. And there was one huge sea, and that is known as Panthalassa. All right. So after as time went on, due to tectonic activities and all, this broke up into different continents and all, and eventually became what we see today. So originally, the peninsular India, together with Antarctica, Africa, Arabia, South America, etc., were part of a supercontinent known as Gondwana land. Okay, Gondwana land was a separate supercontinent. So this Gondwana land, along with the northern supercontinent, that is the Laurasia, constitutes Pangaea. Okay, so initially there was Pangaea. Pangaea split up into Gondwana land and Laurasia. So the peninsular India was actually a part of Gondwana land. So along with Africa, peninsular India, South America, everything, Antarctica, Arabia, all these are part of Gondwana land. Then you have in the north, Europe, Russian region, Arctic region, all together forming the Laurasia part. Okay, and due to tectonic activities and all, the peninsular India split from the Gondwana land and eventually hit the Laurasia region, thereby forming the Himalayas by clearing the Tethys Sea. Okay, there was a sea, ocean, small sea known as Tethys Sea in the place where Himalayas is now. And due to this collision by the peninsular India into the Laurasia or into the northern supercontinent, this young-fold mountains known as Himalayas emerged. And the last and final uplift of Himalayas took place in the Pleistocene epoch as early or as recent as 2 million to 12,000 BC. Okay, and still India is moving upwards and Himalayas is growing. The tectonic activity is still very relevant. All right, so when we talk about Indian subcontinent in history, it actually deals with a huge area equivalent to the area of Europe and Russia. It is not the modern day political India that we talk about. It is a region which is situated in about 5 countries: India, Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan, and Pakistan. This together forms the Indian subcontinent. So Indian subcontinent's geography, climate, etc. are influenced by a lot of factors, starting with monsoon. All right, so largely located in the tropical zone. This is a geographical area. I think you know this. I am not going to explain what is the tropical zone and all in detail. Okay, so it is largely located in the tropical zone. Both southwest monsoon and the northeast monsoon are very important for India, for agricultural aspects, for cropping patterns, etc., etc. For example, the Kharif crops in North India depend a lot on southwest monsoon for waters. Okay, and during the winter season, western disturbances gives rain to the North India, thereby aiding to the agricultural process. Coastal regions like Tamil Nadu, etc., benefit a lot from the retreating monsoon, or say the northeastern monsoon. Okay, northeastern monsoon does not bring too much rain to India, but it do bring rain to Tamil Nadu. All right, I think you know that from your geography studies and all. So studying about this monsoonal patterns was very much important for India. Why? Because it was a very crucial turning point as far as trade is concerned. Back in those days, we do not have steam engine or coal ships or anything. Okay, we do not have a electricity functioning ship or anything. We only had the ships that sailed with the wind. So understanding or studying the patterns and flow of the wind helps us in a smoother travel through the sea. Okay, so study of monsoons were very crucial in the process of establishing a sea route from Europe and other parts of the world into Indian subcontinent. So the traders and merchants and travelers started to take advantage of the monsoonal systems in India. Okay, so here you can see a small map of the annual rainfall in India. This is given in your NCERT textbook. Please refer to that and just have an idea about how much rainfall is available where. Most rainfall is available in the northeastern part here and here in the Western Ghats region. Okay, that is obvious. In Western Ghats, there is plenty of rain. And then you have Masenaram and Cherrapunji regions in Meghalaya and all. So these are the excess rain regions in India. And then there are semi-arid regions like Rajasthan and all. Okay, you know all these things. So in the geographical territory that is the Indian subcontinent, we have certain boundaries. So what constitutes these boundaries? Obviously, Himalayas to the north and the seas on the three other sides. Correct. Indian Ocean towards the south, towards the east we have Bay of Bengal, west we have Arabian Sea. We study this in young classes. Okay, in 5th standard or 6th standard, we study that India is surrounded by these three seas and we have Himalayas in the north, etc., etc. What are the advantages of having Himalayas? Himalayas act as a natural barrier towards the cold Arctic winds that is blowing from Siberian region towards India and shields India from such frosts that can occur. Also shields India from various invasions. Right? We talked about this when we studied medieval India. All those medieval Indian invasions in India arrived via the northwestern portion of India and not through northeast. Why? Because Himalayas acts as a natural barrier which is very hard to surmount. Okay, towards the northwest we have the Suleiman mountain ranges. It is a southward continuation of Himalayas, but it is surmountable. Why? Because there are plenty of passes available there. For example, the Khyber Pass, Bolan Pass, Gomal Pass, etc., etc. And Suleiman ranges are joined in the south in Balochistan by the Kirtar ranges, Kirtar ranges, which could be crossed through the Bolan Pass. So these passes helped a lot the ancient travelers and ancient invaders to come to India and come in contact with India. Okay, these passes were also used for facilitating trade between Central Asia, West Asia, and Indian region. Okay, along with maritime trade, overland trade was also very important. I think I have spoken about this a lot in medieval Indian chapters, so I'm not going to repeat it. So if you observe, we will understand that foothills of Himalayas lend themselves to be easier clearance than jungles on alluvial soils and on plains. So earliest settlements, or say we see a lot of very early settlements in the foothills of Himalayas or foothills of hills and on river banks compared to other parts of the northern India. Why? Because it is easy to clear the forests in these regions rather than clearing the forests which are in the alluvial plains of northern India. Okay, in these regions, it is you can actually use a stone tool to cut down trees and clear forests. You also have a direct access to water body. A river is there, a mountain is there, so obviously you will have some water source that is coming down from the mountain. Okay, so that is why people chose to stay towards mountain slopes as well as closer to rivers. But in eastern India, in Gangetic Valley, for example, we do not come across many many settlements in ancient India. Why? Because normal stone tools are not enough to cut through the hardwood trees that constitute the forest of Gangetic Basin. That is why we see an expansion towards Gangetic Basin only after metals, especially iron, is discovered. Alright, so it was natural that earliest agricultural settlements were found in the foothills and uplands, and trade routes followed the Terai route because of the same reason. It is easy to make settlements in foothills and river basins. So here is another map of India showing the relief features of India, which means the mountain features. You have the Himalayan ranges, you have subdivisions Karakoram, Hindu Kush, etc., etc. Please do look into the map from your history textbook and observe the different placements of mountains, plateaus, rivers, etc. Now, as far as rivers are concerned, important rivers are obviously swollen by the tropical monsoons. Okay, there are perennial rivers and there are annual rivers. So those rivers which flow continuously or have water continuously throughout the year are almost all seen in North India and is of Himalayan origin. Why? Because the snow will melt in summer and provides water, and in winter in other times the monsoon will provide water. So one way or another they have waters. And as far as peninsular rivers are concerned, they are seasonal, more or less seasonal. Okay, we get water through the monsoon. There is no mountain system that provides enough glaciers to melt during summer in peninsular India. This is also the reason why, one of the reasons why in modern India we undertake a project known as River Linking Project. Linking North Indian glacial rivers or rivers that originates from these mountain tops to South Indian rivers which are seasonal, which are fed only by monsoonal systems. Okay, these are potential questions. Okay, so keep that in mind for your mains. Anyway, we have about 4 prominent systems of rivers in India. Number one, the Indus system, which is very important for us as far as history is concerned, because Indus Valley civilization is based on this system. Then we have the Indo-Gangetic divide. Then we have the Gangetic basin as such, and then finally the Brahmaputra basin. So if you look at it, you will see that from the west towards the east, we find annual rainfall gradually increasing from 25 centimeters to over 250 centimeters. Okay, again, go back here. In this map, you can understand that. Okay, go back to the other map. You can understand that from west towards east, there is a gradual increase in the amount of rainfall. Clear? So Indus vegetation and possibly the Western Gangetic vegetation could be cleared with stone and copper implements, but this was not possible in case of mid-Gangetic vegetation or lower Gangetic vegetation. Why? Because in the lower Gangetic vegetation, or the Brahmaputra vegetation for that matter, has plenty of influence of rain and all, very good alluvial soil, so hardwood trees, very hard to clear using traditional stone tools and all. You need much more sophisticated tools to cut through these trees. But in the northwest, in the Indus river system, or say in the Indo-Gangetic divide, it is easier for you to clear forests and settle down. This is why, one of the reasons why most of the civilizations or the human settlements in those times were seen towards northwest India rather than northeast or say eastern India for that matter. So therefore, natural resources of less rainy western area were used first, and large-scale human settlements generally spread from west to east. Okay, so the Indus and the Western Gangetic plains principally produced wheat and barley, while the Middle and Lower Gangetic plains largely produced rice. Why? Same reason. Rice is a water-intensive crop, so you need huge amounts of water, which was not available in Northwest India. So in Northwest India, comparatively, a crop that uses lesser water was used. So wheat and barley were the preferred crops. But in Indo-Gangetic basin and Lower Gangetic basin and all, plenty of water is there, so you can afford to cultivate rice. That's it. Okay, so Harappan culture basically originated and flourished in Indus Valley region, and gradually it moved towards Gangetic basin. So the Vedic culture originated in the northwestern frontier province and Punjab, but flourished in Western Gangetic basin. So it gradually moved towards east. And once iron was found, okay, in the post-Vedic culture, because of the finding of iron and using of iron, it became more and more easier to penetrate through very thick forests. All right, so we will see that some of the most powerful dynasties that came up, for example, Magadha, came up there because of the resource of iron. Okay, Magadha flourished in the Bihar region and all, right? So how did that dynasty become that powerful? Because of the availability of iron ores in Bihar region. Clear? So along with all these things, rivers also provided us a means of commerce, transportation, communication. Okay, obviously. Then occasionally there were heavy floods which wiped out a huge area, caused troubles for humans and all, but at the same time filled the area with alluvial soil, so it was useful also. Okay, so important towns and capitals such as Hastinapur, Prayag, Varanasi, Pataliputra, etc. were situated in the banks of rivers for this reason. Okay, because it served as a means of communication, means of transportation, means of water resource. So because of all these aspects, these capital cities were actually situated in the banks of rivers in ancient India. Okay, eastern part of India, we have the Coromandel coast. Obviously, you know that. And eastern Ghats or steppes, they are not very high. They are neither continuous nor so high. There are plenty of openings thanks to the rivers which flow into the Bay of Bengal. Okay, and some of the most important port cities in the eastern coast include Arikamedu, Mahabalipuram, Kaveri Pattanam, etc. etc. All these are situated in the Coromandel coast. If you are history optional students, please do look into the exact location of these areas in your map. And in the western side, the sea coast, the major coasts include Malabar coast, which is the top portion of Kerala. Then you have the Konkan coast above that. Together forms the Western Ghats. Okay, I mean not the coastal region. Coastal region is between Western Ghats and the Arabian Sea. So Western Ghats, unlike Eastern Ghats, is continuous and very high. It is not easy to cross Western Ghats. It's very difficult. Okay, so we have some passes and all to cross this, like the Palghat and all. That is a geographical portion, not for us. We will study that if we take on geography in a later point of time. And towards the north or towards the Rajasthan region, we have the Aravallis. Okay, and most of it is covered by Thar Desert. Southern portion of Rajasthan has been comparatively fertile since ancient times. We also find the Khetri copper mines in Rajasthan. Harappans used to get copper from Rajasthan region, and we right now have the Khetri copper mines. So Rajasthan is a region which has a lot of copper. Gujarat is obviously famous for the trade that happens overseas. Gujarat is a port region. The Lothal, the very famous Harappan dockyard, was in Gujarat. You know that already. We will look into it later anyway. So this was all these facilitated trade and commerce in Gujarat. Now, gradually, every region, grew into distinct cultural unit and had its own lifestyle. Okay, obviously, it had its own language, culture, etc., etc. Because of the regional differences between these different geographical units. But at the same time, there was some kind of unity throughout the country because of the constant communication from one part of the country to another. Western Ghats is very high, Vindhyas is very high. That does not mean these prevent communication between or any kind of interaction between the two other parts. No. Himalayas are maybe insurmountable, but Vindhyas, Western Ghats are all surmountable, and there was constant communication between all parts of India, and all this led to a bigger commonality between all these different regions of India. Okay, so eventually we will see that traders and settlers from other parts, foreigners and all from other parts of the world come to India. They settle down here and they started trading here. We will find that some of the ancient cities will go out of picture. Some new ones will come up, etc., etc. Okay, and although most regions had well-defined natural frontiers, not every region possessed the resources necessary to sustain livelihoods in isolation. That is also true. Okay, it is not just for the cultural interaction that this intermingling has to happen. It is also for in search of resources. Indus Valley civilization is not a civilization that had everything. They had to import various stuffs from various other places. For example, tin. Indus Valley did not have tin by themselves. Lapis lazuli, they imported it from Afghanistan because it was not available there. So nobody can exist as a self-sustaining system. Everybody has to depend on someone else too. And that kind of interaction has to go on in order to have a complete lifestyle. Okay, so these kinds of interactions also helped in developing a very composite culture and to bring up that unity that I was talking about. So here is another picture map that depicts the different mineral resources that is available in India. Please go through them when you get time. You can see the Khetri mines here in Rajasthan. You can see Kolar gold mines, Raichur Doab, etc., etc. So the last topic for the day, minerals and other resources. So until human settlements developed, substantial areas of Indian plains were thickly forested. Obviously, I told you why, the reason and all. But eventually, humans started to understand forest. They started to use forest resources for their own purposes. Timber, minor forest producers, etc., were used for a lot of reasons. All right. Timber houses and palisades were constructed, and it can be found in Pataliputra. Pataliputra is actually India's first important capital city. Pataliputra. It was the capital of Mauryas, and it is the first important capital city of India. Okay, so in ancient times, the tool making construction activities were all done using stones. All right, but in historical times, more temples and pieces of sculpture were made out of stone in the Deccan and South India than in plains of northern India. We find more abundance more number of temples and pieces of sculpture in South India and Deccan region compared to that in plains. Okay, richest copper mines are located in Chota Nagpur Plateau. Chota Nagpur Plateau has two very important regions such as Singhbham district and Hazaribagh, both very rich in copper mines. And Khetri mines, something we have already talked about. Khetri is in Rajasthan and Chota Nagpur Plateau, you know, is situated in the eastern or the northeastern region. Alright, and historically, copper was the first metal used by man. Okay, we study about the Chalcolithic age. At that time, I will explain it more clearly. Copper is known as Is. Okay, the historical term is Is, and copper was the first metal used by man historically. And because of that reason, there is a lot of sacred or religious angle to this as well. Copper is considered as a highly pure metal. Okay, because it is the first metal known to man. And Hinduism has associated some kind of ritualistic and religious aspect to copper. That is why most of the metal utensils that we use for sacrificial purposes and religious ceremonies are actually made of copper. And then, I mean, some are made of silver, gold, etc., etc. Now, India in general was scarce in tin. Okay, tin was not a metal that was common in India. It was scarce. And obviously, bronze, in order to make bronze, you need copper and tin. Okay, bronze is actually a mixture of tin and copper. Clear? So tin is not that much seen in India. It is seen only in some pockets, and right now there is a virtual absence of tin within India. Clear? So because of this reason, we do not come across many bronze objects in prehistoric times. Why? Simply because there was a lack or shortage of tin. Harappans possibly procured tin from Rajasthan, but most of their supplies came from Afghanistan. Okay, and if you take a closer look, you will understand that Harappan bronze tools, the quantity of tin or the percentage of tin is comparatively very less. Simple reason, the lack or shortage of tin. Also, this is also the reason for the fact that major part of India had no proper Bronze Age. We talk about Stone Age, we talk about various things, but India do not have most part of India do not have a proper Bronze Age. Why? Because we did not had enough tin to make bronze. Clear? It is only after we came in contact with Myanmar and Malaya region, that is in the early centuries of the Christian era, that we finally had a huge, resource of tin. Okay, tin was abundant in Myanmar region and Malaya region, and it is only then that we started using large scale of bronze utensils and bronze statues and all. Iron ores were very common in Bihar region. I already told you this. In Madhya Pradesh, Bihar, Karnataka and all, we have a huge amount of iron ores. And once the art of smelting using bellows, okay, once this art of making steel was learned, iron could be used for war. It could be used to cut down very thick jungles and all. It could be used as a weapon. And this is one of the reasons why the first empire was in Magadha, and Magadha actually, became one of the strongest powers in those times because of the availability of iron. Okay, iron tools were available to Magadha. It was not so for other Mahajanapadas. Whichever Mahajanapadas had access to iron, they all emerged as superior powers compared to others. Simple reason, iron being more stronger metal than copper or any other such available metals there. Andhra Pradesh, coming to south, Andhra Pradesh had large resources of lead, which explains why a large amount of coins made of lead could be found in the Shatavahana dynasty. Shatavahanas ruled over this region, and because of that, most of their coins were actually made of lead. Why? Simply because it was a common metal available in the region. Earliest coins, known as the Panchmar coins, were largely made of silver. Silver is not commonly found in India. It is rarely found in India, but still it was made of silver. At that time, it was very, at least seen in some parts of India. Okay, in ancient India, there were some silver mines available. And silver mines were, existed in regions such as Kharagpur Hills in Mongia district and all. As mentioned as late as in the reign of Akbar. So using these existing silver resources, most of the punched mark coins were made out of silver. Okay, gold. As far as gold is concerned, the most important mine for gold is the Kolar gold fields. Right now it is in Karnataka. The Kolar region is actually the earliest capital of the Gangas of South Karnataka. I'm not talking about the Gangas of Orissa. I'm talking about the Ganga dynasty which ruled over the South Karnataka region, and Kolar region was the capital, earliest capital of Gangas of South Karnataka. And much of the gold used in early times were actually obtained from Central Asia and Roman Empire. From this, we can understand that we had constant trade and commerce relationship with Central Asia as well as Roman region. We find a lot of Roman coins in various parts of India, almost throughout India actually. Okay, so from this we can establish the trade relationships and commerce and economy of that times. India also produced a variety of precious stones, including pearls, okay, especially in Central India, Orissa, etc. Precious stones formed an important item of trade in articles which were eagerly sought by Romans in early centuries of Christian era. So, naturally, India was from those times very attractive destination because of the wide variety of resources available here. And as time went on, more and more trade came into the picture. Eventually, in the medieval India, we see Central Asian dynasties trying to attack India. We already studied about that. And in modern India, we see the Europeans also eyeing into India for the same reason. So, overall, in history, we can say that India was a land of resources. All right, until it was basically depleted and drained by British. Okay, that story we already saw. So today we are going to stop this session here. I am sorry that it took a lot of time, but I hope you got a base. This is the base from which we will study or we will construct the rest of history. Okay, this won't be a 16 lecture series. This will be a shorter series. Okay, but I hope it is worth it. I hope you understood whatever I'm trying to convey. If there are any queries, please feel free to personally WhatsApp me if you want. My WhatsApp number is provided in the Telegram channel. Okay, this is the Telegram channel link. It is also given underneath in the YouTube description session. Please do subscribe to my channel, Telegram channel. I will upload the PDF of this session also into that channel. Okay, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this stream. Please do so. Any questions? We'll study features of civilization in next class. In next class, we have to study regarding Stone Age and all. Okay, there is, I think, the next chapter is regarding Stone Age, and then we have to study about say Bronze Age, Chalcolithic period, and all. And then I think we will start with Indus Valley civilization. All right. I mean, it is important for UPSC this Stone Age and all. That is where we study about megaliths, microliths, and all such things, which are all important for history for UPSC, both for prelims and mains. So some such chapters are also to be covered before we actually enter into Indus Valley civilization. Okay. So thank you all for joining me. We will see again day after tomorrow with the second lecture of Ancient India. Until then, bye bye.